Whether you're new to oil painting or you've been using the medium for a while, there are some really simple things that you really need to know. 1, you need to know about colour names. 2, you need to know about their drying times, their consistency. You need to know about your painting surfaces, and you definitely need to know about safety. Number 1, colour names. You can go into a shop and buy a dozen different cerulean blues from a dozen different companies, but doesn't mean that they're all the same. Different companies will use different pigments, but still call their paints cerulean blue. So I got caught out a while ago. I use cerulean blue. It's one of my staples on my portrait palette, and I tried a different brand. Didn't look at the pigment, and it ended up being a slightly different colour. So I had to adjust how I used it. So one way you can avoid the same problem is to actually get in the habit of looking at which pigments have been used to make that colour. Don't just read the name of the paint. So on the back of your tube, it will have which pigments have been used. It will list which pigments have been used to make that paint. Cerulean blue has PB, pigment blue, 36. Some brands have PB 35. One number difference, a big difference in colour. Both work brilliantly, but they are just different. So don't go into a shop and just buy alizarin crimson or cerulean blue without checking the pigment on the back of the tube. It's going to help you in the long run and keep you consistent in the paints that you use. Number 2, drying times. Love it or hate it, oil paints take a while to dry. But that's cool. Like for me, I really like that. But different oil paints take a different length of time to actually dry. And it's really important that you actually understand which ones are quicker and which ones take longer. And the reason why it's important is because if you put a layer of paint that dries quickly on top of paint that you've already got down that dries slowly, you're going to get some cracking. So here's a little oil paint 101 for you. The color that we see is ground pigment, and that ground pigment is suspended in oil. Now the different pigments require different amounts of oils, and that's what actually determines the drying time. So as a general rule of thumb, your earthy colors, your raw siennas, your yellow ochres, even your ivory black, the pigment isn't suspended in as much oil, which means they dry that little bit quicker. But other colors, such as your cadmiums, alizarin crimson, have a lot more oil that the pigment is suspended in. Therefore, they take a lot longer to dry. I literally had alizarin crimson on my palette for over a week with no cover, and it's still really wet. So obviously, if I'm going to use that in a painting, I need to be aware that it goes on top of layers that dry quicker, not underneath them. Unless, of course, you want cracking. If you want that effect, not a problem. You can put the quick drying oil on top of a slow drying oil and you'll get a really cool crackling. But just make sure you want that effect first. Number 3 is consistency of paint. Now look, this is a personal choice. Me, I love the creamy butteriness because I tend to use slightly softer brushes. I don't use hog hair brushes, which I'll talk about in another video. The creaminess of the paint works because of the brushes that I use. But you can get paints that are slightly grainy or thicker and gluggier as well, and that suits certain people. It depends. You are going to have to try the different paints, and different brands of paints will have a different consistency, but that is purely an artistic choice. There's no right or wrong, just do what you're enjoying. And seriously, that's the key. You need to enjoy it. Oh my goodness, you need to have fun. Need to know number 4 is your painting surfaces. It is horrible to go through the whole process of knowing your pigments, knowing its drying time, knowing the consistency, getting your image all set up. To put all of that effort onto an ill-prepared surface is heart-wrenching. Because of the oil paints chemistry makeup, you've got oil that will seep into any surface that hasn't been prepared properly. It can rot canvas, it can rot wood, it can rot paper. So any surface is fine as long as you prepare it properly for oil paints. It's not the same if you're using acrylics and watercolors. Oil is different. So even if you buy canvases from a shop that says it's already prepared and already has its gesso on it, you do need to redo it at home, because trust me, they're not as well prepared as what they should be. So do yourself a favor, spend a little bit of extra time and just prepare your surface properly. And that way your oil paint stays on the top of the surface and doesn't seep on through. Need to know number 5, safety. Sometimes easily overlooked. Even in the early days, I tended to do it. Ventilation is paramount. Oil paints are hazardous chemicals. You need to protect yourself from it. So make sure your space is well ventilated and go that little extra step and wear gloves. It's going to protect your skin from getting too much contact with oils. It can sometimes take a little bit to get used to wearing, but seriously, once you're used to it, it's almost impossible to paint without them. I don't even open a tube of paint anymore without having my gloves on first. So, looking after yourself means that you've got more years to paint in a healthier way. So it's a win-win. So if you like what you've heard today, you know the usuals: subscription, bell, all of those things. There's more information in the links below as well. And of course, if there's something specific you would like me to talk about, let me know in the comments below. And wear gloves. I'm trying to put them on.